My name is Danielle Robinson, and I'm the widow of Sergeant First Class Heath Robinson.
Danielle, can we talk back forward?
Yeah, more. No, you're good. Sorry.
You've probably done one or two of these recently. Right?
Yeah, I've done a few. Okay, maybe. Is that better?
That works.
Okay.
Thank you. Let's start the story with the way most people might know you from recently. Obviously, you got, I don't say name drop, but literally the president pointed at you during his State of the Union speech. Obviously, it's for an important topic to you, but just tell us what that moment was like to start off with.
So I was at work. I'm a physical therapist here in Central Ohio, and I was working with a patient with balance exercises, and I was told by my front desk that I needed to get back to my phone. I had an urgent message from John Stewart. I did not know this was coming. Basically, he said, I need your permission to give the White House your contact information. They would like you tomorrow, this is the day before the State of the Union, they would like to have you as a guest of honor sitting next to the First Lady during President Biden's speech.
So I'm assuming a lot of things had to happen really fast.
Yes, I didn't even have time to think about it.
But I'm assuming for something that's important to you, it had to be an instant yes to make that happen.
Absolutely. So we went into rush mode to get me out there. I never once dreamed that I would be talking to President Biden and Dr. Jill Biden about a burn pits issue. So it was an honor.
Obviously, for anybody who's read anything online about you, they know why this is important, but if you don't mind just sharing your story with us.
Sure. My husband was deployed. We actually met in between his Kosovo deployment to Camp Bondsteel and his deployment to Baghdad, Iraq, to Camp Liberty and Victory. He was an Army medic at the time when he was deployed. He came back home, was good, healthy. He ended up being NCO of the Year in 2012 and 2013 for the state of Ohio, which is a really grueling military warrior competition. He advanced to regionals and took second. So he was in good health. He was getting ready to think about Army Ranger School and was starting to train for that. And his runs started getting more tedious. He was struggling to run. And then shortly after that change, he started having uncontrollable nosebleeds. So once those started, extreme fatigue was kicking in, and he'd get off work. He was active duty AGR for a combat engineers unit here in Central Ohio. And when he would get off work, I'd come home and he'd be asleep on the couch the whole evening. So I'm a physical therapist, and I know red flags, differential diagnosing. So I said, you need to go to primary care and find out what's going on. So the process of differential diagnosing began for us, and basically what happened was he ended up with a paralyzed vocal cord, and a doctor at Ohio State couldn't determine why this was going on. He then was sent to an autoimmune specialist through Ohio State who diagnosed him with mucous membrane pemphigoid. It's a very rare autoimmune disorder. It's prevalent in 80-year-old women. And the doctor had only diagnosed a handful of this diagnosis in people in 20 years. So in my head, I'm like, my husband was really happy he had a diagnosis, and it was something that could be controlled with steroids, and he was really happy and thrilled to come home and be like, I have an answer, after about 6 months, of no answers. And right away in the back of my head, I just kind of gut feeling, I'm like, this isn't it. So I convinced him still to go back to primary care, and then he referred him to an ear, nose, and throat doctor who actually for once said, do you have swollen lymph nodes anywhere? And my husband's like, yeah, I think I have some in my neck. He's like, I want to biopsy one of those. And sure enough, it came back non-small cell adenocarcinoma. And the doctor said, I believe it's lung. I'm going to get you into the oncologist. And we were at an oncologist the next day. When we walked into the oncologist's room, he looked at us and he said, the first thing he said was, what have you been exposed to? Your cancer is presenting as a toxic exposure start. And unfortunately, you're so far progressed that you're terminal, and you have 4 to 6 weeks to live. And he told us he had to leave the room. He began to cry. He came back in and he said, I need you guys to prepare for end of life, but these are your options. And he gave us options of what to do. Of course, my husband right away wanted to fight. We had a 3-year-old daughter at the time. And he knew that if he passed, she would miss out on a lot with him and maybe not even remember him. So we started the most aggressive chemo. This was a Friday. We started the most aggressive chemo on Monday.
What year was this?
This was 2017. He was deployed to Iraq in 2006 and 2007. So this was 10 years later after his deployment. He was a non-smoker, perfectly healthy. Again, everybody with lung cancer automatically, first question out of a healthcare professional's mouth is, are you a smoker? First question out of civilian everyday people is, are you a smoker? So there's a misconception a lot about lung cancer out there as well. But for him, we started finding out, we found out through testing that he was going to respond to immunotherapy. And so the doctor let us know that with immunotherapy, it can extend your life and your quality of life for anywhere from 6 months to about 3 years. So during that time span, he got his voice back. He was doing really well overall, other than having coughing fits, still nosebleeds because it was also coming from his mucous membrane pemphigoid, and a lot of fatigue still, and then all the side effects you get from chemo. They were doing a chemo combination with the immunotherapy for a while just because he was so progressed that that's what the oncologist felt was going to get the cancer a little more under control. We knew it wasn't going to go away. And then at that point, he stopped responding about 18 months later to the immunotherapy. He ended up struggling to breathe every day and was put on oxygen. He started doing like radiation type therapies just to make him more comfortable, to shrink other areas of metastasis to other areas of his body. He actually did CyberKnife, which was really painful. They go in and inject a speck of gold in your lung, and you're awake for it. He ended up having a heart surgery at one point because the cancer spread to the pericardium around his heart, and it was strangling his heart to pump, basically. So they went in and did a pericardial window on him. Everything was obviously very painful procedures. He then, the oncologist did one last attempt of the Opdivo Yervoy mix on him, and he didn't respond to that. So then he started, losing weight. Walking was getting worse. He was in and out of the ER. We were at every Central Ohio healthcare facility around here. Every physician that saw him could not believe his story. Every nurse, every physician was just like, wow. They never knew what to really say to us. They really didn't know how to treat him at that point except just try to make him comfortable. But he wasn't willing to give up yet because he still wanted time with his daughter. So he fought through a really hard fight. I ended up having to step back from work to take care of him. He ended up on Veterans Day in 2019 getting medically separated from the Ohio National Guard, and we entered the VA process. As soon as we entered the VA process, we were still getting a lot of his health care taken care of. Unfortunately, they started delaying a lot, so his treatments would be delayed. His approval to get imaging would be delayed for the oncologist. They were denying medications he needed to make him comfortable. And then I was denied caregiver benefits by the Columbus VA. He went into hospice in February of 2020 during the start of COVID. And he had had a radiation to his back for metastasis to his spine for comfort, and all of a sudden there's this event that can happen where basically your body will start fighting the cancer again. So he was able to get off of hospice, which our oncologist was completely shocked to see us back in the office, and they just kind of started other treatment to keep him going. He wasn't ready to give up yet. And then March and April were decent for him. And then all of a sudden it came back with a vengeance. And by the end of April, if he even would go to stand up, his O2 sats would drop into the 60s. I had to dress him, bathe him, feed him, position him in bed to prevent bed sores. I had to give him his medication. And I was basically a 24/7 caregiver, and the VA denied me. They sent a nurse to the house who said that I should get the highest rating of a caregiver, and I still was denied. We appealed it during this process, and then he ended up going back into hospice, and he passed on May 6, 2020.
I'm sorry not to interrupt, but
Yeah.
did they ever give you any reasons for those delays or those denials?
Yes, so he was 100% service connected for lung cancer, but they said it was not proven to be combat related or due to burn pit exposure. So they denied me because of that, because I couldn't prove that, they said. But he was 100% service connected. So when you think you're 100% service connected, you think you're going to be taken care of, and he wasn't. And then when he passed, I received a letter later that week that I had to go to the post office to sign for to get. And I thought it was something more important. Here it was a letter from the VA saying, we saw your appeal process, we had a hearing on it, and due to the death of your husband, we're closing this case. Thanks for taking care of our soldier.
You mentioned that the tricky oncologist, the first thing he asked was, were you exposed to anything toxic? When did that light bulb moment happen when he realized burn pits were part of this ailment?
So, right when we saw the oncologist, he said that the very first time we met him, he said the way that the lung cancer presented, it was in all his interstitial linings of like his lungs, his trachea, that area, and I guess the way that it presented, he said it's only due to toxic exposure. And he had written letters for us, for the military and the VA, stating that. Now, after my husband passed, but when my husband got the word of that, it surprised us. So we went home and we were worried about myself and my daughter. So we did a radon test of our house and it came back fine. And my husband still wasn't thinking or said he was around a burn pit until another soldier's wife sent me a letter saying, or an article. She sent me an email of an article about burn pits. So I didn't know what a burn pit was when the oncologist said that to us. It wasn't until I read that article, I went downstairs. I was upstairs at the time when I was reading it, and I went down to Heath, and this was about a week after he was diagnosed by the oncologist. And I just said, were you around a burn pit? And he goes, yeah, I actually was. I was around a burn pit at the start of my deployment in Iraq and at the end, about a month and a half each time, and I had guard duty near one. And I just said, well, what's a burn pit? And then that's when he told me that it was the way that the military disposed of trash. They threw everything over there that they could into it, like we would at home, styrofoam, chemicals, batteries, computers, human feces, waste from the clinic that he was working in, and they would light it up with jet fuel. And it wasn't just a little small thing, it was the size of football fields, and they would keep it burning all day long. So right away, I was furious, because here you're home, you were healthy, this was 10 years ago, why didn't I ever hear about it? And now you're possibly dying because you're exposed to a burn pit that our government allowed you to be around without any protection. So you can only imagine what you feel.
Tell me, let's move to today. Obviously we're talking about this issue because, State Union, this is something that I'm assuming you've been working on or trying to bring awareness to for the last 2 years.
Absolutely.
What's happening today with the issue?
So today there is a lot of legislation out there and bills in the House and Senate for burn pits. And a lot of these bills are just little tidbits of trying to get our soldiers kind of coverage for them. There is some better bills out there that will grant presumption. So that means that if you were actually over in Iraq and Afghanistan and you were on a base that had a burn pit, you will be covered if this bill passes, no matter what. You don't have to be an advocate for yourself and say it's related to a burn pit. Even if you were in the predicament of the burn pit, you're going to be covered and there wouldn't be questions asked. The Honor Our Pact Act is something that is granting presumption. A lot of these other bills are not doing that. So they're not going to be giving our veterans the health care that they deserve. But the Honor Our Pact Act will.
I'm assuming access to care, obviously, you see the bills for just stub toe, it can be expensive. I'm assuming you talk about cancers and things like that. Those are costs that can add up, and without coverage, this is hundreds of thousands of dollars for families like yourself that you're fighting for, it sounds like.
It is. But it's not about money. It's about, we constantly thank a soldier. And I've been even asked, well, I've told my story a little bit, and right away people are like, well, thank you for your husband's service. And I kind of cringe when I get that, because honestly, everybody is so quick to thank a soldier, but they're not willing to help a soldier. When a soldier is someone who went to battle for our freedoms and our rights and our country, and in order to help thank a veteran again, first of all, our government and our Congress should go ahead and step in and try to pass legislation that's going to help them, not continue to have the VA deny them or give them the runaround or have the veteran have to be the advocate. The Honor Our Pact Act will help them, and the best way to thank a soldier is to try to get our senators on board with the new bill in the Senate to help get that accomplished and happen and signed.
What do you want our viewers here in Central Ohio to know? Maybe they might know you personally, what do you know about your story and what you're fighting for today?
My story is just one of many. I've already had many military families reaching out to me just since I've been to the State of the Union with the same stories, and they didn't know who to reach out to or where to find help because they're getting denied benefits from the VA. So I want Central Ohio to know that we're only one story, but there's so many families that are affected across the country out there, and this is going to actually do something to help those families.
What is, not to get too into it, but what is that experience like? I mean, obviously it sounds like you're still working full-time, you're a mom, you do have a life, but this is also something that is personal and near to your heart. To have that kind of response and to also take on this work as well. What is it like to be going through all of this still?
It's challenging to find the balance. Since 2 weeks ago, I really honestly haven't had a lot of time around my daughter as much because I'm working full-time as a physical therapist, taking care of my patients. And then I'm going home and trying to get little bouts in with her, whether getting homework done and getting her fed, and then I have media contact me or, people from Burn Pits 360, which we're trying to continue to work hard to advocate and be on the same page for things that are happening across the country for events for this and trying to raise more and more awareness. So it's just, honestly, I don't sleep much right now.
And the reason I ask that is because obviously you're doing this for a reason. Obviously this is something that impacted you. So obviously, this is something that you believe is worth that lack of sleep.
It is. It is. I didn't sleep for him, taking care of him, and I'm not going to continue to back down on the fight until we get what we need out of this.